instead of writing a message or a series of messages in our WhatsApp group that Raph will read the first sentence of and then just kind of drift off, I figured why not put out a quick video, and I'll try and make it as quick as I can. I know it's not brevity is not always my strong suit, but I'll try and do a series of small ones instead of one massive one. That way I don't run the risk of teaching Pamela too much. This first one, I just want to try and keep it as basic as I can for those who have never actually used Yahoo before and just want to kind of figure out the basics while also figuring out what we're drafting next week. And then I'll come up with some other ones about a draft and how to manage teams and stuff like that as we get going. All right, so this is our main screen. This part will go away once I finalize, which I'll do today. More often, the big thing I think you probably have to figure out if you haven't done a pool like this before, aside from things like just basic positions and all that, it is a head-to-head league, so every week that you play, the one reason why football becomes so popular with fantasy sports is you don't have to check it every single day. It really is a team can play no more than once a week. So while there is usually one in the first week, there's 2 Thursday night games, and similarly there's usually one, and in the first week there's often 2 Monday night games. The majority of the games are played on Sunday, starting at 1 o'clock Eastern time, which is 7 our time. So that's when later on when I say rosters lock and you can't take any more players or anything like that, I'll deal with that in a future video. That's when most of the games start. So realistically, you only really have to pay attention once a week to pretty much make sure that everything's fine. And then the other part is it doesn't really matter how many points you score on a weekly basis. I mean, it does overall. It can be a tiebreaker later on. But realistically, you're not trying to be the best every week. You're just trying to beat the person you're against. So in the first week, it's me against Paul. So if I have the second highest total score of everybody in the league, but Paul has the first, I get the loss, he gets the win. It doesn't matter, right? So if you're playing someone who just happens to be really weak that week, you could get a free win. Okay, so that's one thing just to think about. For how this kind of looks and positions, so what you're going to want to do, there's a ton of stuff you can do here if you really, really get into it, but my guess is at the beginning, just let's keep it simple. League is going to just show you kind of standings, your team, my team, and then matchups and players. These 4 will be the 4 that you probably will use. The rest of them probably not so much. So if you go to my team, eventually when we draft, this is where your teams will be. I'll show you what that looks like here in another league that I'm in. So this is one I drafted a little while back. So when you draft players, it'll look like this. Okay, your bench and your starters. You notice there's a color difference. That's because any points that are scored, so this guy, Brian Robinson, if I don't end up playing him in the first week, he could get as many points as possible. It does not go towards my score. Only the starting roster actually matters. So when Pamela's friend had said you just need to check your roster to make sure that people that are in your starting thing are actually playing and they're not hurt or you don't want them in there, that's what they were talking about. And that's as easy as if I wanted to put him in, I click on him. The positions he could go in for, which I'll talk about in just a second, are here. All you have to do is I would just press on the person. They automatically switch. Okay? So to go back to our league, right now we don't have any players, but this is the one thing that's going to make us slightly different. So quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, a flex, a kicker, and a defense. So just quickly, quarterbacks, I think what spurred this on was the love of, or at least for some people, the love of the Netflix show. So normally, if you're ever reading about this and other things, or you're trying to find something to help cheat your draft or give you ideas, if they refer to something as a standard draft, often what they're referring to is 1 quarterback. We went 2 quarterbacks because I wanted to make it, I figured since that was the position that kind of brought some people in, let's make it 2. So quarterbacks will be slightly more valuable in our league than in other leagues because usually they're not as much as other positions. They're the ones who throw, obviously. They also can get points for running the ball. Wide receivers, they traditionally just catch. Okay, now this is a point per reception. What that means is every time they catch the ball, that is 1 point for your team. Okay, even if it's a catch for 0 yards, you still get the 1 point for them catching it in the first place. Some running backs run, but not very many. Running backs, so obviously running backs are the ones that get the handoff and they actually just run it, but a lot of running backs will also catch passes. The ones that do both do have a bit more value. I'll show you that in just a second. Tight ends, they're the ones who are actually quite big. They block most of the time, but every once in a while they do come out and catch. So there's some tight ends that actually catch more than others, even though some tight ends might be really good. They're easy to spot because Yahoo tells you who they are. This one called a flex, you'll notice W, R, and T. What that means is it can be a wide receiver, running back, or tight end. Any given week, you can switch in and out anywhere you want. And it just can be any of those positions. If you are reading any of those things or you hear one of your articles call something a super flex league, that is not us. Super flex allows a quarterback to also be here. We don't do that. Kicker, they kick the ball, okay? You don't get negative points for them missing like in some leagues. I wanted to just keep it positive. Plus, I wanted point totals to be high because I think it's more fun to cheer for. The further the kick, the more points you get. Yeah, that's about it. Defense, you're drafting a team, not a player, and what they do matters in terms of how many points they let up, but also how many turnovers they get. Those are like fumbles or interceptions, blocked kicks, all those things. You get points for those, okay? We have a 6 bench, okay, and those are the people that you keep. So when you draft a player, you have them and no one else can have them unless you drop them or trade them. So you keep people on your bench that you don't want to play that week, but you want to keep for a multiple of reasons, okay? So hopefully that kind of helps out. For matchups, every time you click it, it's just going to show you the screen of the person that you're playing. As soon as we both have rosters listed, it will tell us who's there, and then Yahoo's will tell us who they think is going to win. Players. Okay, these are some of the positional things I mentioned. Now, here's just the one thing. I'll go in more detail on the next one when I do a mock draft for those who want to see what it looks like when you actually draft online. There's a series of rankings. So this is from last year. You always have to pay attention to what the rankings are. This is from last year's season total. That's why quarterbacks tend to score more points than most. The reason why they're not drafted as much is because all quarterbacks score a fair bit, and this difference between them isn't always as high. So if you wanted to see more specifically what that looked like, you just go there. Quarterbacks, and this gives you an idea about the, it seems like there's a big deviation, but if you think about it, they play 17 games, right? So the per week is a little bit different. Whereas running backs, you go here, it gives you a list, etc. Okay, what you probably want to look at for ones looking ahead, if you're going to look at this at all, is what they're supposed to do this year. So Yahoo has predicted, here's season projection, and here's where they think they're going to fall. When I mentioned before about running backs, 1,000 yards, either rushing or receiving, are the magic numbers of people that they think are good. So they think this person is going to run for 1,000 yards. There's people who are supposed to run for more, but if you look, they also think he's going to catch for quite a few. 600 is quite a lot. 72 catches is a lot of catches. So what they're essentially saying is these top two guys are top 2 because they also catch the ball a great deal. That's it. Okay, so if you want to know if the running back has more than one purpose, you just look at what their stats are supposed to be or what they were last year. Or you just listen to Yahoo because you'll notice they have a preseason ranking, an actual ranking, percent of people in the world that would have them in their roster, stuff like that. So whatever you want to go on, I'll go in much more detail about that when we get to the mocks. Okay, so if you're looking at anything here, you'll notice these are just available players. When I go to the league I've already drafted, when I go to players, you'll notice most of those players aren't here. Even Tom Brady, who's not technically even playing, they have him in here in case he unretires and plays, and he scored a lot of points last year. So if I went here to season projected, the reason why there's different players here is these are the ones that are available, meaning no one has taken them and they're free. If you see these brackets, I'll get to that in a bit more detail. It's once they're dropped and once we finish our league, everybody is undraftable for the next couple days. And then they do something called clear waivers. Pamela, I'm dangerously trying to teach you something here. I'm going to talk about that more when I get to one of the last ones, when we actually have a team. Essentially, this is just a rule put in so that if an idiot like me was up on a Sunday, late Sunday, and I'm watching the games and someone gets hurt and I can go in and take their replacement and kind of get like a deal, the league is set up so you can't do that. There's a day that, there's a certain day that everyone has to remain where you can't take them, and then in the middle of the week they become takeable for everybody, so you don't have the advantage. I think it benefits a lot of people that don't watch a lot of football, which I think is a lot of this league. But in any particular case here, you can scroll through, you can see who's supposed to be good. Let's say I needed a running back, I could go here, I would take one, I just hit the plus, but I'll deal with that when I talk about more. I take you through other things. I think that's pretty much it. I just wanted to, like I said, cover some of the basics. So if any questions, let me know, but I'll get on to an actual draft so you can see what that looks like for the next one.